November 20th, 1943. 6:14 a.m. Betio Island, Tarawa, Atoll, Central Pacific. The air is already thick with heat, even though the sun has only begun to rise. Lieutenant Commander Maso Tanimoto of the Imperial Japanese Navy stands inside a reinforced command bunker carved deep into the coral of Betio Island. The walls around him are layered with timber steel plating and meters of packed sand. Outside, rows of concrete pillboxes face the lagoon like silent guardians. You can hear the distant rumble first. It rolls across the water like distant thunder. Naval gunfire. Tanimoto lifts his field binoculars and steps to the narrow observation slit cut into the bunker wall. Through the haze of early morning light, the Pacific horizon is filled with shapes. American warships, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, an entire armada. Behind him, an Imperial Japanese Navy radio operator adjusts the headset on a Type 94 naval radio set. Static crackles through the room. Captain Keiji Shibazaki, commander of the Japanese garrison on Betio Island, enters the bunker with steady steps. His uniform is immaculate despite the humidity. The white gloves remain tucked neatly in his belt. Shibazaki has spent months preparing for this moment, months studying maps, months supervising construction, months building defenses the Americans have never faced before. Outside the bunker, Betio Island is no longer a simple coral strip. It is a fortress. 14 coastal defense guns, dozens of reinforced bunkers, hundreds of machine gun nests, miles of trenches carved into the coral, steel obstacles driven into the lagoon to shred landing craft before they reach shore. The garrison numbers more than 4,500 men. Imperial Japanese Navy, Special Naval Landing Forces, and Korean labor battalions. They are supplied with Type 92 heavy machine guns, Type 97 20mm automatic cannons, Type 89 grenade dischargers, mortars, anti-boat mines. Shibazaki studies the distant ships through his own binoculars. His voice remains calm. They will not take this island. The radio operator glances up briefly. Shibazaki continues, "It would take 1 million Americans 100 years to conquer Betio." The men inside the bunker nod. They have heard the statement before. Confidence is not just encouraged in the Imperial Japanese Navy. It is expected. The Americans have landed on islands before. Guadalcanal, Tulagi. But those islands were jungles. Tarawa is different. Tarawa has no jungle. There is nowhere to hide. Every inch of the lagoon is mapped. Every firing angle calculated. Every bunker interlocking with the next. Artillery ranges measured to the meter. Tanimoto lowers the binoculars slowly. The American fleet continues to grow. USS Maryland, USS Colorado, USS Tennessee, heavy cruisers like USS Indianapolis, destroyers forming outer screens. Smoke begins to rise along the shoreline as the first American shells crash into the island. The ground trembles. Sand pours from the ceiling beams, but the bunkers do not collapse. They were built for this. Weeks earlier, Japanese engineers reinforced the structures with layers of coconut logs, steel plating, salvaged from wrecked ships, and tons of coral sand packed tight. A 16-inch battleship shell strikes the outer defense line. The explosion sends a column of coral dust high into the sky. But the pillbox remains. Inside, a machine gun crew waits patiently behind a firing slit only a few inches wide. They do not fire yet. They conserve ammunition. Timing matters. Outside, the bombardment intensifies. American shells fall faster. Destroyers move closer to the reef. You can hear the scream of incoming artillery now. Whistling, shrieking, crashing. The island shakes again. Tanimoto checks his watch. 6:23 a.m. The bombardment has only begun. Inside another bunker, closer to the lagoon, Lieutenant Hiroshi Watanabe sits beside a Type 92 heavy machine gun mounted on a steel tripod. His assistant gunner wipes sweat from his forehead. The gun barrel points toward the shallow water where American landing craft must pass. Watanabe listens carefully. The naval bombardment does not frighten him. He expected it to. Japanese doctrine assumes the Americans will rely heavily on artillery before any landing. Bombardment, then infantry. It is predictable. The bunker roof absorbs another shockwave. Dust rains down. Still intact, the assistant gunner laughs quietly. American shells are strong, he says. Watanabe nods. but they cannot kill men who are underground. Across the island, dozens of similar bunkers remain silent. Thousands of Japanese defenders crouch behind reinforced walls, waiting, watching, listening. In the command bunker, Captain Shibazaki studies the lagoon through binoculars again. He sees something new now. Movement behind the American warships. Landing craft, hundreds of them. LVT amphibious tractors. LCV P. Higgins boats. They are forming into long assault lines. The first wave will come across the lagoon toward the beach. Shibazaki lowers the binoculars slowly. His staff officers lean over the map table. Grid coordinates. Pre-measured artillery zones. Machine gun sectors overlapping like spider webs. Every bunker has assigned firing arcs. Every trench has secondary lines. Even if one bunker falls, the next will continue firing. The Americans will walk into a wall of fire. Shibazaki turns to Lieutenant Commander Tanimoto. Signal all positions. The radio operator begins transmitting through the Type 94 radio. Short coded bursts. Orders ripple across the island. Hold fire until landing craft cross the reef. Conserve ammunition. Wait for the optimal range. Outside, American naval shells continue to smash into Betio, but many of the Japanese defenders remain untouched, protected by coral bunkers buried deep into the ground. In one bunker near the center of the island, Sergeant Kenji Takahashi adjusts a Type 89 grenade discharger. He listens to the bombardment with mild curiosity. The Americans rely too much on machines. Ships, bombs, artillery. Machines break, men endure. Takahashi glances at the flamethrower stored against the bunker wall. Captured months earlier during earlier fighting in the Pacific. An American weapon, heavy steel tanks, fuel hoses, ignition nozzle. He remembers when the engineers first brought it in for inspection. The men laughed. Flamethrowers, a weapon of fire. Primitive, short range, dangerous for the operator. Japanese doctrine considers them crude. Artillery wins battles. Machine guns hold ground. Infantry charges decide wars. Fire weapons are merely tools for clearing trenches, not real battlefield weapons, certainly not decisive ones. The bunker shakes again as another American shell explodes nearby. Outside, the lagoon water churns. Landing craft begin moving forward, long gray lines advancing slowly across the shallow reef. From the command bunker, Shibazaki watches through binoculars. Hundreds of American Marines are coming. The officers inside the bunker exchange calm glances. The island is ready. The defenses are perfect. And the Americans are about to learn why. November 20th, 1943. 7:02 a.m. Betio Island, Tarawa, Atoll. The bombardment finally begins to fade. For nearly 90 minutes, American battleships and cruisers have pounded the island with shells weighing nearly a ton. The lagoon is still covered with drifting smoke. Coral dust floats through the air like gray snow. Inside the reinforced command bunker, Captain Keiji Shibazaki slowly lowers his binoculars. The ground tremors have stopped. The Americans believe the island is dead. Lieutenant Commander Masao Tanimoto wipes coral dust from the map table. The grid lines remain visible beneath a thin layer of powder. Outside, the lagoon begins to clear. You can now see them clearly. Hundreds of American landing craft moving toward the reef. The first waves of LVT amphibious tractors crawl across the shallow coral like armored insects. Behind them, rows of Higgins boats approach in tight formation. Shibazaki studies the movement carefully. He checks his watch. 7:05 a.m. Still too far. He turns toward the radio operator beside the Type 94 set. Confirm all positions are holding fire. The operator nods and taps the transmission key. Short coded bursts echo across the island. From bunker to bunker, the same order repeats. Hold fire. Wait. Across Betio Island, thousands of Japanese defenders remain perfectly still inside their positions. In a reinforced pillbox overlooking the lagoon, Lieutenant Hiroshi Watanabe crouches beside his Type 92 heavy machine gun. The weapon rests on its steel tripod behind a narrow firing slit only a few inches tall. The barrel is already aligned with a narrow corridor across the reef. His assistant gunner watches the approaching American tractors through a periscope mounted in the bunker roof. The assistant whispers, "They are coming closer." Watanabe does not answer. He simply adjusts the elevation wheel. Outside, the amphibious tractors move steadily forward. Many of them carry American Marines crouched low behind thin armor plates. Their helmets are visible above the metal hulls. The distance closes slowly. 200 meters, 150 meters. Still no Japanese gunfire. On board the LVTs, American Marines glance nervously toward the silent island. You can hear engines rattling and grinding as the tracked vehicles struggle across the coral reef. Water splashes against the metal hulls. Private First Class Daniel McLeod of the 2nd Marine Division grips his M1 Garand rifle tightly. He expected resistance already, but the island is silent. No gunfire, no explosions. Just smoke drifting above rows of broken palm trees. One Marine beside him mutters, "Maybe the Navy killed them all." The LVT continues crawling toward the beach. Behind them, the Higgins boats begin slowing down as they reach the coral reef. Many of the wooden craft cannot pass the shallow barrier. Marines begin climbing over the sides, wading through chest-deep water while holding rifles above their heads. The assault waves stretch across the lagoon in long, scattered lines. From the command bunker, Captain Shibazaki watches every movement. He waits. The Americans continue moving forward. Closer, closer. Finally, the first LVT reaches the shallow sand near the beach. Shibazaki raises his hand. Now, across Betio Island, dozens of bunkers erupt to life at the same moment. The silence shatters. Machine guns roar. The Type 92 heavy machine gun inside Watanabe's bunker begins firing instantly. The weapon produces a steady, rhythmic hammering sound as the belt-fed ammunition feeds through the receiver. The assistant gunner watches through the periscope. The first American tractor is hit immediately. Bullets tear into the thin metal armor. Sparks flash across the hull. The vehicle jerks sideways. Another burst hits the driver compartment. The tractor stops moving. Behind it, Marines begin jumping into the water trying to escape the burning vehicle. Mortars begin firing from concealed pits behind the beach. Type 89 grenade discharges thump in steady rhythm. Shells explode among the Marines wading through the lagoon. Water erupts in tall, white columns. Men fall. Rifles sink beneath the surface. Across the reef, the Higgins boats become perfect targets. Machine gun fire rips through the thin wooden sides. Bullets pass completely through the hulls. Inside one landing craft, Corporal James Walker watches 3 Marines collapse almost instantly as the gunfire tears across the boat. The coxswain shouts over the engine noise, "We cannot go forward," but there is nowhere else to go. The reef traps them in open water. On Betio Island, Lieutenant Watanabe calmly adjusts his firing arc. The machine gun continues hammering across the lagoon. This is exactly what Japanese planners expected. The Americans are exposed. Slow, vulnerable. In the command bunker, Captain Shibazaki watches the chaos unfolding through binoculars. The beach is already covered with explosions. Marines struggle through deep water while carrying heavy equipment. Many never reach the shore. Shibazaki lowers the binoculars. His officers exchange satisfied glances. The plan is working perfectly. American artillery destroyed many surface structures during the bombardment, but the core defenses remain intact. The bunkers are alive. The machine guns are firing. The lagoon itself has become a killing zone. In a forward bunker near the center of the island, loads another mortar shell into a tube positioned behind a low coral wall. The shell slides down the barrel. A sharp thump. Seconds later, an explosion erupts among a group of Marines struggling through waist-deep water. Takahashi wipes sweat from his face. He has seen American flamethrowers before. Months earlier, during fighting in the Solomon Islands, they were used to clear trenches and small defensive positions, but they were slow, heavy. Operators were easy targets. The Japanese army never considered flamethrowers a serious battlefield weapon. Takahashi remembers the training officer laughing during a briefing. "Fire is frightening," the officer had said, "but bullets kill." Inside Takahashi's bunker, the captured American flamethrower still rests against the wall. No one has touched it in weeks. Outside, the lagoon is filled with gunfire and explosions. American Marines continue struggling toward the beach. Some reach the sand, others disappear beneath the water. The defenders of Betio Island remain confident. Their bunkers are holding. Their weapons are working, and the Americans appear trapped in the open. Yet across the lagoon, something unusual is beginning to happen. Several amphibious tractors have reached the beach intact, their rear hatches open. Inside, small teams of American Marines begin unloading strange equipment, long metal tubes, heavy fuel tanks strapped to their backs. Sergeant Takahashi does not see them yet. Neither does Captain Shibazaki. But on the smoking beach of Betio Island, a handful of Marines are assembling weapons that will soon change the entire battle. November 20th, 1943. 8:11 a.m. Betio Island shoreline, Tarawa Atoll. The heat over the lagoon has become suffocating. Smoke from naval bombardment mixes with the stinging smell of burning fuel and shattered coral. The beach is no longer a clean strip of sand. It is a chaos of broken landing craft, scattered equipment, and wounded Marines struggling to find cover behind whatever debris they can reach. Machine gun fire from the Japanese bunkers continues to sweep the shoreline. Every few seconds, another burst tears across the beach. Private First Class. Daniel McLeod presses himself flat against the sand behind the twisted metal of a destroyed amphibious tractor. The vehicle still burns slowly, thick black smoke pouring from the engine compartment. Bullets strike the metal hull with sharp metallic cracks. You can hear them snapping through the air. Every movement on the beach draws fire. Around McLeod, Marines from the 2nd Marine Division try to organize themselves despite the chaos. Officers shout orders that are almost impossible to hear over the constant gunfire. Captain Robert H. Dunlap of Company C crouches behind a low coral ridge while studying the Japanese defenses through binoculars. The situation is worse than expected. Many of the bunkers survived the naval bombardment. Their firing slits are almost invisible against the coral walls. Every approach to the island is covered by overlapping fields of fire. Dunlap lowers the binoculars. "This beach is locked down," he mutters. Nearby, Sergeant Anthony Mendez adjusts the straps on a heavy metal tank mounted on his back. The tank is connected to a long steel tube with a small ignition nozzle at the end. It is an M2 flamethrower. The equipment weighs nearly 70 pounds when fully fueled. 2 cylindrical tanks contain thickened gasoline mixed with diesel fuel. A smaller pressurized tank forces the liquid forward through the hose. When the trigger is pressed, an electrical igniter at the nozzle sparks the fuel into a roaring stream of fire. Sergeant Mendez glances toward the nearest Japanese bunker. From this distance, the structure barely looks like a target. It is built low into the coral ridge just 20 meters inland. Only a thin horizontal slit reveals the machine gun hidden inside. The gun continues firing across the beach. Every Marine who tries to move forward becomes a target. Captain Dunlap crawls toward Mendez. "Can you reach that bunker?" Mendez studies the distance carefully. Flamethrowers have limited range. About 30 to 40 meters in ideal conditions. Closer is better. Much closer. "I will need to get almost on top of it," Mendez replies. Dunlap nods. "There are few other options. Artillery cannot hit such small targets without hitting Marines nearby. Rifles cannot penetrate the bunker walls. Machine guns cannot reach the hidden firing slit, but fire might." Behind them, another group of Marines prepares a second flamethrower team. Private Harold Jennings checks the ignition wire while his assistant secures the fuel valves. They have practiced this many times during training in Hawaii. But training ranges do not shoot back. A burst of Japanese machine gun fire suddenly strikes the sand only meters away. Coral fragments spray into the air. Everyone presses lower. The bunker continues firing steadily. Inside that reinforced position, Lieutenant Hiroshi Watanabe calmly feeds another ammunition belt into his Type 92 heavy machine gun. The weapon's steady hammering fills the small bunker. His assistant gunner watches through the periscope. "The Americans are pinned," the assistant says quietly. Watanabe nods. Everything is unfolding exactly as expected. The bunkers are nearly impossible to approach under direct fire. Japanese planners designed them specifically to survive bombardment and dominate the beaches. From this bunker alone, they have already stopped dozens of Marines from advancing inland. Outside, the burning amphibious tractor near McLeod begins to collapse inward as the heat warps its metal frame. Behind it, Sergeant Mendez prepares to move. 2 Marines with rifles crawl beside him to provide covering fire. Captain Dunlap raises his hand. Now, the riflemen open fire toward the bunker slit. Their bullets spark against the concrete and coral walls. The machine gun pauses for a fraction of a second. That moment is enough. Sergeant Mendez runs. The heavy fuel tanks bounce against his back as he charges across the open sand. Bullets snap past him. One round strikes the metal cylinder on his back but fails to penetrate the steel casing. He keeps running. 10 meters, 8 meters, 5 meters. The bunker firing slit suddenly turns toward him. The machine gun begins firing again. Sand erupts around his boots. But Mendez dives forward behind a small coral mound just beside the bunker wall. He rolls onto one knee and raises the flamethrower nozzle. Inside the bunker, Lieutenant Watanabe sees the strange device through the firing slit. He has seen flamethrowers before. Primitive weapons, short range, unreliable. His gunner laughs. Fire weapon. Watanabe does not appear concerned. The bunker walls are thick, concrete reinforced with coral and timber. Fire cannot penetrate steel and stone. Outside, Sergeant Mendez squeezes the trigger. The flamethrower roars to life. A bright stream of burning fuel erupts from the nozzle like a living thing. The flame stretches across the short distance and slams directly into the bunker firing slit. Inside, the effect is immediate. Burning fuel splashes through the narrow opening. Flames explode across the interior walls. The confined bunker turns into an oven in seconds. Lieutenant Watanabe feels the heat before he fully understands what has happened. The flames cling to every surface. Fuel spreads across the floor. The oxygen inside the bunker vanishes as the fire consumes the air. The assistant gunner screams as burning fuel splashes across his uniform. The machine gun falls silent. Outside, Sergeant Mendez holds the trigger for another 2 seconds. Flames continue pouring through the slit. Then he releases the handle. The fire dies down. Smoke begins pouring from the bunker opening. The machine gun does not fire again. Around the beach, Marines stare at the bunker in stunned silence. One of the strongest defensive positions on the shoreline has gone quiet. Inside the command bunker, farther inland, Captain Keiji Shibazaki hears the sudden silence over the battlefield noise. He raises his binoculars. One of the forward bunkers has stopped firing. He frowns slightly. Perhaps the crew was killed by naval bombardment earlier, or ammunition ran out. He does not yet understand what happened. But on the smoking shoreline of Betio Island, the Marines have just discovered that fire can do what artillery could not, and the battle is about to change. November the 20th, 1943, 9:03 a.m. Central Sector of Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The sun is now high enough to burn the coral white. Heat radiates from the sand, from the shattered palm trunks, from the metal wreckage scattered across the beach. Smoke hangs low over the island, drifting slowly inland with the faint sea breeze. But something else has changed. The line of Japanese machine gun fire along the central shoreline has begun to break. Not everywhere, not yet, but in small, sudden gaps. Private First Class Daniel McLeod notices it first. The bunker that had pinned him behind the burned-out amphibious tractor for nearly 20 minutes is now silent. Thick black smoke pours from the narrow firing slit. A Marine beside him whispers, half in disbelief, "Did we knock it out?" Sergeant Anthony Mendez, still crouched beside the bunker wall, pulls the heavy flamethrower nozzle away and checks the pressure valve on the fuel tank strapped to his back. The weapon is still warm from the blast of fire. 2 Marines cautiously approach the bunker entrance from the rear trench line. One kicks open the steel-reinforced door. A wave of hot air and smoke pours out. Inside, the machine gun crew lies motionless on the bunker floor. The type: 92. Heavy machine gun still rests on its mount. The weapon itself is undamaged, but the men who operated it never had a chance to escape. Outside, Captain Robert H. Dunlap studies the result through binoculars. For the first time since the landing began, he sees an opening. He signals forward. "Bring up the next team." Behind the wrecked landing craft scattered across the beach, additional flamethrower units begin moving forward. The M2 flamethrower is not an elegant weapon. It is heavy. The fuel tanks make the operator an obvious target. If a bullet pierces the tank, the result can be catastrophic. But on Betio Island, the Marines are discovering something critical. The Japanese bunkers are strong against artillery. They are strong against rifle fire, but they are vulnerable to something that does not rely on penetration at all: fire. Across the beach, Sergeant Harold Jennings adjusts the straps of another flamethrower while crouching behind a pile of coral rubble. His assistant, Private Louis Ramirez, checks the ignition battery. Jennings points toward a second bunker positioned 30 meters inland. From its narrow slit, another Type 92 machine gun continues sweeping the beach. Several Marines attempt to advance across the sand, but are forced to dive for cover under the bursts of fire. Jennings exhales slowly. "That one next." Captain Dunlap gives a quick nod. Riflemen open suppressive fire toward the bunker opening. Bullets spark against the coral-reinforced walls. Inside the bunker, the Japanese machine gun crew notices the change immediately. Corporal Takashi Mori. The gunner narrows his eyes as rifle fire strikes the outer wall. His assistant glances through the periscope tube mounted above the firing slit. Americans are moving again. Mori adjusts the aim slightly and resumes firing. The machine gun roars. Outside, Marines drop flat against the sand. For several seconds, the bunker dominates the beach once more. Then Jennings moves. He rises from behind the coral ridge and sprints forward with the flamethrower tanks bouncing against his back. Private Ramirez follows close behind, carrying an extra fuel cylinder. Inside the bunker, Mori notices the movement through the slit. A man running, a strange metal tube in his hands. Mori frowns. Flamethrower. He remembers the weapon from training manuals. It was never considered a serious threat to hardened defenses. Short range. Exposed operator. A weapon better suited for trench clearing. The bunker walls are thick. The firing slit is narrow. Fire cannot reach them here. Mori does not stop firing. Outside, Jennings drops behind a small ridge only 6 meters from the bunker wall. Machine gun rounds strike the coral around him. Fragments cut into his sleeves. He ignores them. He lifts the flamethrower nozzle and presses the trigger. A roaring stream of flame erupts forward. The burning fuel arcs directly into the bunker slit. Inside the enclosed space, the results are immediate and devastating. The flames fill the narrow chamber in an instant. Mori barely has time to release the machine gun grips before the fire engulfs the interior. Burning fuel splashes across the walls and floor. The heat becomes unbearable within seconds. The oxygen inside the bunker disappears as the flames consume it. Outside, Jennings holds the trigger for another brief burst. Then he releases it. The fire dies away. Smoke begins pouring from the bunker opening. The machine gun falls silent. For the second time in less than 30 minutes, a fortified Japanese position has been neutralized without destroying the bunker itself. Across the beach, Marines begin advancing cautiously. Each time a machine gun bunker fires, the pattern is now becoming familiar. Rifle fire suppresses the slit. A flamethrower team moves forward. Fire enters the bunker. The gun stops. In the command bunker farther inland, Captain Keiji Shibazaki studies the battlefield through binoculars. At first, the changes seem minor. Individual bunkers going quiet. Temporary interruptions in gunfire. But as the minutes pass, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. 3 bunkers along the central beach have stopped firing. Then a 4th. Lieutenant Commander Masao Tanemoto points toward the shoreline. Those positions should still be operational. Shibazaki adjusts the binoculars. He sees Marines moving between the wrecked landing craft. Some of them carry unusual equipment on their backs. Twin metal cylinders, a long metal tube extending forward. Flamethrowers. Shibazaki lowers the binoculars slowly. He has seen such weapons before, but they were never considered decisive. They were viewed as support tools, crude weapons for clearing trenches, not instruments capable of defeating reinforced fortifications. Yet several of his strongest bunkers have already gone silent. Inside the command bunker, an officer speaks quietly. Perhaps the crews were killed by a bombardment earlier. Shibazaki does not answer, because through his binoculars he has just seen another bunker engulfed in flame. The machine gun inside stops firing within seconds, and the Americans continue moving forward. November 20th, 1943. 10:27 a.m. Central Defensive Line. Betio Island, Tarawa. Atoll. The battlefield has changed. 2 hours earlier, the beach was a killing ground. Japanese machine guns dominated every approach from the lagoon, and the Marines could barely move without being cut down by overlapping fields of fire. Now the pattern of the battle is shifting, slowly, reluctantly, but unmistakably. Smoke rises from several silent bunkers scattered along the shoreline. Their firing slits are blackened, the interiors choked with heat and fumes. American Marines continue advancing in short, cautious bursts from crater to crater, from wrecked landing craft to broken coral ridges. You can hear the different rhythm of the battle now. Rifle fire, short machine gun bursts, and occasionally the violent roar of a flamethrower igniting. Private First Class. Daniel McLeod crawls behind a shattered concrete barrier that once formed part of a Japanese trench wall. His uniform is soaked with sweat and seawater. Just ahead of him, another bunker still holds. Its Type 92 machine gun continues firing across the sand in long, disciplined bursts. Every time a Marine tries to move forward, the weapon sweeps the beach again. McLeod presses his helmet deeper into the sand as another burst cracks overhead. The bunker is positioned perfectly, half buried into a coral ridge, reinforced with timber beams and sand packed tight between concrete walls. Naval shells struck the area earlier that morning, but the structure survived. Almost every bunker has survived. That was the entire point of the Japanese defensive design. Strength through concealment, strength through depth, strength through overlapping fire. But the Americans have begun using a weapon that was never part of the Japanese calculations. Behind McLeod, Sergeant Anthony Mendez checks the pressure gauge on his flamethrower again. The metal tanks on his back are lighter now. More than half the fuel has already been used, clearing bunkers along the beach. His assistant, Corporal Thomas Briggs, hands him a fresh ignition battery. Still working, Mendez nods. For now, Captain Robert H. Dunlap studies the remaining defensive line through binoculars. 3 bunkers remain active in this sector, all of them positioned slightly farther inland. Their firing slits are narrow, barely visible beneath layers of coral and camouflage netting. But the Marines now know how to deal with them. Rifle teams suppress the openings. Flamethrower teams move forward. Fire enters the bunker. The gun stops. It has worked every time so far, yet the danger remains enormous. Flamethrower operators are priority targets for Japanese defenders. The fuel tanks make them easy to spot, and if the tanks are pierced, the result can be fatal. Captain Dunlap turns toward Mendez. One more push. Mendez nods once. He adjusts the shoulder straps and begins crawling forward. Inside the bunker ahead, Sergeant Kenji Takahashi sits beside the machine gun crew while preparing another mortar shell. The battle outside sounds different now. Earlier, the machine guns fired constantly. Now the rhythm is irregular. Some bunkers nearby have gone quiet. He glances toward the firing slit. The machine gunner, Corporal Shoji Kato, continues firing carefully measured bursts across the beach. But Takahashi notices something troubling. The Americans are moving closer. Not charging wildly, not running blindly. They move with purpose. They advance in short, controlled movements. And occasionally, the machine guns that oppose them suddenly fall silent. He remembers the captured weapon still resting inside their bunker, the American flamethrower that engineers examined weeks earlier. The men laughed at it. Heavy, crude, dangerous to the operator. Now, Takahashi begins to wonder if they misunderstood the weapon entirely. Outside the bunker, Mendez closes the distance carefully. 20 meters. 15. The machine gun continues firing past him, focused on Marines farther down the beach. Corporal Briggs whispers. Closer. Mendez nods. 10 meters now. Inside the bunker, Corporal Kato suddenly notices movement near the wall. He shifts the machine gun slightly. The firing slit reveals a brief glimpse of metal cylinders on a Marine's back. Recognition flashes across his face. Flame weapon. He shouts the warning. Takahashi immediately understands. The bunker erupts into frantic movement, but there is almost no time. Outside, Mendez rises to one knee and lifts the nozzle. He presses the trigger. The flamethrower explodes to life with a violent roar. A brilliant stream of burning fuel shoots forward and pours directly into the bunker opening. Inside the confined chamber, the effect is catastrophic. Flames fill the narrow space instantly. Fuel splashes across the interior walls and equipment. The temperature spikes within seconds. Takahashi feels the air vanish from his lungs as the fire consumes the oxygen in the bunker. The mortar shell slips from his hands and rolls across the floor. Corporal Kato releases the machine gun grips as the flames engulf the firing position. Outside, Mendez releases the trigger. The burst lasted only 2 seconds, but it was enough. The machine gun stops firing. Smoke begins pouring from the bunker opening. For a moment, the battlefield grows strangely quiet. Private McLeod slowly lifts his head from the sand. The bunker that dominated this section of the beach has fallen silent. Captain Dunlap lowers his binoculars. That was the last strong point controlling this stretch of shoreline. The Marines begin moving forward again. Across Batio Island, more bunkers are beginning to fall the same way, one after another. The Japanese defensive plan had been designed to resist artillery, to survive naval bombardment, to break infantry assaults with machine guns and mortars. But the plan had never accounted for the possibility that the bunkers themselves could become traps. In the command bunker farther inland, Captain Keiji Shibazaki continues studying the battle through binoculars. His expression is no longer confident. Several of the strongest positions along the beach have already gone silent. Without those bunkers, the American Marines are beginning to move inland. The island is still heavily defended. The Japanese garrison still holds the interior trench lines. But something critical has changed. And even as Shibazaki watches another bunker erupt in flames, he refuses to admit what that change truly means. November 20th, 1943. 12:18 p.m. Interior trench line, Betio Island, Tarawa. Atoll. The sun now stands directly overhead. Heat presses down on the island like a physical weight. Coral sand reflects the light upward, turning the entire battlefield into a furnace. Smoke from burning bunkers drifts slowly inland, mixing with the smell of oil-scorched wood and burned fuel. By midday, the battle line has shifted nearly 60 meters from the original shoreline. American Marines have forced their way past the first ring of Japanese bunkers. But the fight has not slowed. If anything, it has grown more violent. Inside a narrow coral trench running across the center of Betio Island, Sergeant Kenji Takahashi staggers forward through thick smoke. His uniform is streaked with soot, his face blistered by heat from the bunker fire earlier that morning. Behind him, a handful of surviving defenders regroup inside a deeper trench network. Machine gun fire crackles somewhere ahead. Mortar shells continue falling along the beach. But the carefully designed structure of the defense is beginning to unravel. The first line of bunkers had been the backbone of the entire defensive plan, each one positioned to cover the lagoon, each one linked to neighboring positions by trenches and communication tunnels. Now many of those bunkers are silent, not destroyed, just silent. Inside the command bunker, deeper inland, Captain Keiji Shibazaki stands over the map table with Lieutenant Commander Masao Tanimoto and several staff officers. The map is covered with grease pencil markings. Each bunker position, each trench line, each artillery point. Red marks now circle several forward positions. Positions that have stopped reporting. Tanimoto speaks carefully. 6 bunkers along the central beach are no longer responding to radio signals. Shibazaki studies the map. His jaw tightens slightly. Damage from naval bombardment, one officer suggests. But Shibazaki shakes his head. The bombardment ended hours ago. He raises the binoculars again and studies the battlefield. From the command bunker entrance, he can see Marines moving inland between the ruined palm trees and shattered coral walls. They advance cautiously, but they are advancing. More troubling is the pattern of smoke rising from several bunker positions. Black soot marks the firing slits. Some bunkers appear intact, yet they are no longer firing. Shibazaki lowers the binoculars. What weapon are they using? The officers exchange uncertain glances. One junior officer finally answers, "Flamethrowers." The word hangs in the air for a moment. Flamethrowers. The weapon had been mentioned during earlier Pacific battles, used occasionally by American engineers, but always considered secondary. An unpleasant tool, perhaps, a frightening one, but not decisive. Shibazaki remembers the training briefings. Flamethrowers require the operator to approach extremely close to the target. The fuel tanks make them vulnerable. A single rifle bullet could ignite the entire pack. Surely such a weapon cannot defeat reinforced bunkers. Yet the evidence outside the bunker walls says otherwise. Another machine gun position near the central trench suddenly falls silent. A brief burst of orange flame flashes above the coral ridge. Then smoke pours from the bunker opening. Inside the command bunker, the radio operator turns from the Type 94 radio set. No response from Bunker 7. Tanimoto exhales slowly. The defensive network was designed like a web, each bunker supporting the next. But if the nodes of the web disappear one by one, the entire structure weakens. Outside, the battle has moved into the trench lines themselves. Private First Class Daniel McLeod advances cautiously along a shallow communication trench behind a squad leader from Company C. The trench walls are rough coral blocks reinforced with timber. Japanese defenders fire from the far end. Rifle shots echo through the narrow corridor. A Marine tosses a grenade around a corner. The explosion shakes loose coral dust from the trench walls. Then the squad advances again. Behind them, Sergeant Anthony Mendez struggles to keep pace with the flamethrower tanks still strapped to his back. The weapon has already been used repeatedly along the shoreline. But now, the Marines are discovering a second role for it. Trench clearing. A narrow side trench branches off the main line ahead. Inside, Japanese defenders fire rifles from a reinforced dugout. The position cannot be reached easily with grenades. Rifle fire alone cannot drive them out. The squad leader turns to Mendez. "Burn it." Mendez nods. He steps forward carefully. The trench walls confine movement. The nozzle of the flamethrower rises above the sandbags, protecting the dugout entrance. He presses the trigger. Fire erupts into the trench with a roaring blast. The burning fuel splashes across the dugout opening and pours down into the interior. The defenders inside scream briefly. Then the trench falls silent. For the Marines advancing through the coral maze, the effect is immediate. Every time the flamethrower quickly. Inside the Japanese trench network, farther inland, confusion spreads. Many defenders had never faced flamethrowers directly before. They expected artillery. They expected grenades. They expected bayonet charges. But the sudden arrival of fire inside enclosed bunkers and trenches produces something entirely different. Heat, smoke, the rapid loss of breathable air. Sergeant Takahashi moves deeper into the trench line, coughing as smoke drifts through the narrow passages. Several defenders gather around a machine gun position, still covering an interior approach to the island airfield. One of them speaks nervously. "They are burning the bunkers." Takahashi wipes sweat from his face. He finally understands what is happening along the shoreline. The bunkers that once seemed invulnerable have become traps. Once fire enters the confined space, there is nowhere to escape. But there is little they can do about it now. The Americans are already inside the defensive perimeter, and every minute that passes, another bunker falls silent. November 20th, 1943. 2:41 p.m., Western Defensive Sector, Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The battle that began at the shoreline has now reached the heart of the island. The original Japanese defensive plan had been built around a single assumption. The Americans would be stopped at the beach. Every bunker, every trench, every artillery piece had been positioned with that expectation in mind. The lagoon would trap the landing craft. Machine guns would cut down the Marines before they reached solid ground. Mortars would break any survivors who reached the sand. If the beach remained secure, the rest of the island would never face direct assault. Now that plan is collapsing. The first defensive line along the lagoon is no longer a continuous wall of fire. Instead, it has become a series of scattered strong points, surrounded by American Marines moving steadily inland. From the command bunker near the center of Betio Island, Captain Keiji Shibazaki watches the battlefield through binoculars with growing disbelief. The once orderly firing lines have fractured. Several bunkers still fire toward the beach, but they now shoot blindly past American units already moving through the trenches behind them. Lieutenant Commander Masao Tanimoto studies the map table again. The grease pencil markings that once represented an organized defense now look meaningless. Entire sectors of the beach line have gone silent. Trench routes connecting the bunkers have been cut. Radio contact with multiple forward positions has vanished. Shibazaki lowers the binoculars slowly. The Americans are inside the perimeter. No one in the bunker argues. Outside, the sound of flamethrowers erupts again, somewhere along the trench network. A deep, roaring blast, then shouting, then silence. The weapon is appearing again and again across the battlefield, not just at bunkers, inside trenches, inside dugouts, inside ammunition pits. The Marines have learned quickly. Wherever a defensive position refuses to surrender, fire follows. Inside one surviving bunker along the western trench line, Corporal Daichi Fujimoto grips the handles of a Type 92 heavy machine gun while scanning the trench ahead. Smoke drifts through the narrow firing slit. Earlier in the morning, his bunker fired continuously toward the lagoon. Now the gun points inland. American Marines are already inside the trench system. Fujimoto watches the corridor carefully. A grenade rolls around the trench corner ahead. He barely has time to shout before the explosion shakes the bunker walls. Dust falls from the ceiling beams. Then rifle fire echoes through the trench outside. Fujimoto opens fire. The heavy machine gun rattles violently as bullets tear through the narrow passage. 2 Marines collapse in the trench, but the Americans do not retreat. They scatter into side trenches and shallow craters. Seconds later, another sound appears, a sound Fujimoto has already begun to recognize. The low mechanical hiss of pressurized fuel moving through a hose. His assistant gunner freezes. Flamethrower. Fujimoto's confidence evaporates instantly. He has heard the stories spreading through the trench network. Bunkers filled with fire. Men suffocated by heat and smoke. Defensive positions that once seemed invincible turning into ovens within seconds. He swings the machine gun toward the trench entrance, but the angle is wrong. The bunker slit cannot aim downward enough to fire directly into the trench corner. Outside, Sergeant Anthony Mendez appears again with a heavy M2 flamethrower on his back. His assistant, Corporal Briggs, crouches beside him with a rifle ready. The Marines in the trench shout warnings. Machine gun ahead. Mendez nods. He already knows. The roar of the weapon had echoed through the trench moments earlier. He moves forward carefully. 5 meters. 3 meters. The bunker firing slit appears above the trench wall. Inside, Fujimoto sees the nozzle rise into view. He squeezes the machine gun trigger, but the weapon cannot angle low enough. The bullets strike the trench wall. Then the flamethrower ignites. Fire pours directly through the bunker opening. Inside the enclosed space, the heat arrives instantly. Fujimoto releases the machine gun grips as burning fuel splashes across the interior floor. The air inside the bunker vanishes as flames consume the oxygen. The machine gun falls silent. Outside, Mendez releases the trigger. Smoke pours from the bunker opening. The trench grows quiet again. Behind him, Marines advance through the corridor. Every bunker cleared this way opens another gap in the defensive line. Back in the command bunker, Captain Shibazaki hears another machine gun position fall silent somewhere across the island. He studies the battlefield again through binoculars. American Marines now move across ground that was supposed to remain under constant machine gun fire. Several trench intersections are ready in their hands. The airfield at the center of the island is now only a few hundred meters away. Shibazaki places the binoculars on the map table. The original defensive doctrine had been absolute. Hold the beach. Destroy the landing force before it can establish a foothold. Every bunker, every gun, every trench was designed around that single moment. But the Americans have passed that moment. They're inside the fortress now, and the weapons once dismissed as crude are dismantling the defense piece by piece. November 20th, 1943. 5:32 p.m. Near the central airfield, Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The afternoon light begins to fade, but the heat refuses to disappear. Even as the sun sinks toward the horizon, the coral ground continues radiating warmth from hours of relentless bombardment. Smoke from burning bunkers drifts slowly across the flat surface of the island airfield. The battle has moved here now. What began at the shoreline has reached the center of Betio. For Captain Keiji Shibazaki and the surviving officers of the Japanese garrison, the airfield was never supposed to become a battlefield. It was meant to remain behind the defensive lines, protected, secure. Now, American Marines are already fighting among the trench systems that surround it. Inside the command bunker, the atmosphere has changed completely since morning. The earlier calm confidence is gone. Maps are spread across the table, but many of the marked positions no longer respond to radio calls. The Type 94 radio crackles with static as the operator attempts to contact the remaining bunker commanders. No answer. Lieutenant Commander Masao Tanimoto leans over the map. Our western trench line has been breached. Shibazaki nods slowly. He already knows. The sound of combat has been moving closer for hours. Machine gun bursts echo from directions that once belonged to secure interior sectors. Flamethrowers roar somewhere beyond the palm stumps. Then silence. Then shouting. Another bunker lost. Another trench captured. Shibazaki studies the map one final time. The original defensive system was designed to trap the Americans on the beach. But once that first line collapsed, the rest of the island had far fewer prepared positions. The trenches around the airfield are strong, but they were never meant to fight alone. They were meant to support the beach defense. Now they must carry the entire battle. Shibazaki turns toward his officers. Prepare counterattack groups. The order spreads through the remaining trenches. Small groups of Japanese defenders begin gathering for night assaults. Rifles, grenades, bayonets fixed. In the Imperial Japanese Navy, counterattacks are expected, even when the defensive lines begin to fail, especially then. But organizing such attacks becomes increasingly difficult. Communication trenches are broken. Many units no longer know where neighboring units are located. And worst of all, the Marines advancing across the island now carry weapons that make every defensive position uncertain. In a trench running along the edge of the airfield, Sergeant Kenji Takahashi gathers several surviving soldiers around a machine gun nest constructed from sandbags and coral blocks. The Type 92 heavy machine gun is still operational. Ammunition belts lie stacked nearby. For the moment, this position still holds. But Takahashi knows the Americans are close. The pattern of battle is now unmistakable. First rifle fire, then grenades. Then the sound that every defender has begun to dread, the hiss of pressurized fuel. He speaks quietly to the machine gunner beside him. If they bring fire, abandon the position. The gunner looks surprised. Abandon a bunker. That thought would have been unthinkable in the morning. But Takahashi has already seen what happens inside those enclosed spaces. Fire does not simply burn. It fills the air. It consumes the oxygen. Men inside bunkers suffocate before they can escape. He will not allow his men to die trapped inside sandbags and timber. Across the trench line, American Marines prepare their next push toward the airfield. Captain Robert H. Dunlap crouches beside a broken palm stump while studying the trench network through binoculars. Japanese defenders still hold several interior positions. Machine guns fire intermittently from sandbag nests along the airfield edge. Mortars continue dropping shells behind the advancing Marines. But the defensive system is fragmented now. Instead of a continuous wall of fire, the Marines face isolated pockets of resistance. And every time they encounter one of those pockets, the same weapon solves the problem. Sergeant Anthony Mendez sits beside a shallow crater while adjusting the straps of his flamethrower again. The metal tanks on his back are nearly empty now. Most of the fuel was spent clearing bunkers along the beach earlier in the day. But supply teams have already begun bringing forward additional fuel cylinders from the landing zones. Corporal Briggs hands him a fresh tank. Still want it. Mendez wipes sweat from his eyes. Until they stop digging bunkers, they move forward with the next squad. The Marines approach a reinforced machine gun nest built from coral blocks along the airfield perimeter. The weapon inside opens fire immediately. Bullets snap across the open ground. The Marines dive into shallow craters. Dunlap signals the riflemen. Suppressing fire erupts toward the machine gun position. Inside the nest, here's the incoming rounds striking the sandbags. He glances down the trench. A Marine appears carrying the familiar twin cylinders on his back. Flamethrower, Takahashi shouts immediately. Out now. The machine gun crew abandons the position and retreats deeper into the trench. Seconds later, the flamethrower erupts. Fire pours across the empty nest. The sandbags ignite. Smoke billows into the air. But when the Marines advance to capture the position, they find it abandoned. The defenders have already fallen back. It is the first time that day a flamethrower fails to trap its targets. Yet even this retreat reveals the deeper truth of the battle. The Japanese defenders are no longer fighting from secure fortifications. They are running from them, and every bunker that once promised protection now looks like a place where fire might appear next. November 21st, 1943. 1:47 a.m. Central trench system near the airfield Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll. Night has fallen over Tarawa, but darkness has not brought silence. Gunfire still cracks across the narrow strip of coral that makes up Betio Island. Occasional mortar shells burst into white flashes that briefly illuminate the broken palm trees and shattered bunker walls. The battlefield now glows with scattered fires. Some come from burning equipment, others from bunkers ignited earlier in the day, and some from the flamethrowers that continue to appear in sudden bursts across the trenches. The air smells of smoked salt and burned fuel. Inside a shallow communication trench near the airfield, Sergeant Kenji Takahashi crouches beside a small group of surviving defenders. Their uniforms are dark, with sweat and soot. Many of them have been fighting continuously since the American landing the previous morning. The original defensive plan is gone. The beach defenses have collapsed. Most of the bunker network has fallen silent. Only scattered trench positions remain between the Americans and the far western tip of the island. Takahashi studies the battlefield through a narrow gap in the sandbags. The Americans are closer than ever. He can hear their voices now, short commands shouted in English, the metallic click of rifle bolts, the clatter of equipment against coral, and occasionally the quiet mechanical sound that every Japanese defender on the island has learned to fear, the hiss of pressurized fuel. In the early hours of the battle, many soldiers dismissed the weapon. Flamethrowers were crude tools, unreliable, dangerous for the operator, effective perhaps in clearing trenches, but not a weapon capable of deciding the fate of an island fortress. That belief lasted only a few hours. Now every defender understands something that no training manual had prepared them for. The bunkers that once felt like armor have become cages. Inside the command bunker, deeper inland, Captain Keiji Shibazaki stands beside the map table under the dim glow of a small lantern. Most of the markings on the map are now irrelevant. Entire sectors of the island are in American hands. The airfield has been breached. Only the western tip of Betio remains under organized Japanese control. Lieutenant Commander Masao Tanimoto listens to the radio operator attempting once again to reach the remaining defensive units. The Type 94 radio produces only bursts of static. Most of the island is now silent. Shibazaki lifts his binoculars and looks toward the eastern side of the island where the first landing occurred. Even in the darkness, he can see the outlines of American Marines moving through the captured trenches. They are methodical, disciplined. They do not rush. They move from position to position, clearing every bunker and dugout. Where resistance appears, flamethrowers follow. Then the resistance disappears. Shibazaki lowers the binoculars slowly. He finally understands the scale of the mistake. The defensive system was designed to resist artillery and naval bombardment. It was designed to destroy landing forces trapped in the lagoon. But once the Marines reached the trenches, the very strength of the bunkers turned against their defenders. Every reinforced chamber, every narrow firing slit, every sealed dugout, all of them created perfect environments for the one weapon the Japanese command had never considered decisive: fire. Out in the trench network, Takahashi hears footsteps approaching along the narrow coral corridor. American Marines appear at the far corner of the trench intersection, rifles raised, flashlights briefly cutting through the darkness. Takahashi signals his men. They open fire. Rifles crack in the confined space. The Marines drop behind the trench wall. For a moment, the fight stabilizes again. Then, Takahashi hears the sound, the familiar mechanical hiss. He turns toward the trench corner. The nozzle of a flamethrower rises slowly above the sandbags. For a split second, he considers holding the position, but he remembers the bunkers along the beach. He remembers the screams inside those sealed chambers. He shouts the order: "Fall back." The defenders retreat deeper into the trench just as the flamethrower erupts. A river of fire pours through the intersection. The sandbags ignite instantly. The trench walls glow orange under the flames. By the time the fire dies away, the position is empty. The Marines advance through the burning trench and continue moving westward. Across Betio Island, the pattern repeats again and again through the night. Every defensive position discovered by the Marines faces the same choice: fight and risk being trapped by fire, or abandon the position and retreat. Either way, the defensive system continues shrinking. Inside the command bunker, Captain Shibazaki finally sets the binoculars down on the table. For the first time since the battle began, no one in the room speaks, because the truth has become impossible to deny. The island fortress that was supposed to hold for months has already been broken, and the weapon once dismissed as crude has turned every bunker into a liability. November 23rd, 1940. 9:12 a.m. western edge of Betio Island. Tarawa Atoll. The battle is ending. Smoke still drifts over the shattered strip of coral that once served as the strongest defensive fortress in the Gilbert Islands. The lagoon water is filled with wrecked landing craft and floating debris. Burned palm trees stand like blackened skeletons across the island. But the gunfire that once echoed across Betio for 2 full days is fading. American Marines move cautiously through the final trench systems near the western tip of the island. Rifles ready, grenades in hand, flamethrowers slung across their backs. They advance slowly because experience has taught them something important during the last 48 hours. Every bunker, every dugout, every narrow trench corner could still hold defenders. Private First Class Daniel McLeod steps carefully over a collapsed sandbag wall while scanning the final defensive trench ahead. 2 days earlier, he had crouched helplessly on the shoreline while machine gun fire swept the beach. Now he walks through the center of the island. The transformation feels almost unreal. Beside him, Sergeant Anthony Mendez adjusts the straps of his flamethrower for what may be the last time in the battle. The metal tanks on his back are scarred with scratches from coral fragments and bullet impacts. But the weapon still functions. It has been used dozens of times since the Marines first reached the beach. At first, the flamethrower was simply another tool carried by the assault units. Now every Marine in the division understands its purpose. Ahead of them, a final bunker sits half buried beneath a mound of coral and shattered timber. The structure is smaller than many of the earlier fortifications, but its firing slit still faces the trench. A Marine raises a hand. Movement. The squad spreads out along the trench walls. Rifles aim toward the bunker opening. Inside the dark chamber, 2 Japanese defenders remain. They have no radio, no connection to the command bunker, no clear understanding of how much of the island has already fallen. They only know that American soldiers have been advancing steadily through the trenches. One of the defenders grips a rifle while staring toward the bunker entrance. The other holds a grenade with the pin already pulled. They wait. Outside, Captain Robert H. Dunlap studies the bunker briefly through binoculars. This is the final resistance in this sector. He turns toward Mendez. Clear it. Mendez steps forward. The heavy tanks shift slightly on his back as he raises the metal nozzle. Inside the bunker, the defenders see the familiar silhouette appear in the trench. Twin fuel cylinders, a long metal tube. They have heard the stories. They have seen the smoke rising from other bunkers across the island. They understand what comes next. The grenade falls from the soldier's hand before he can throw it. Outside, Mendez presses the trigger. Fire explodes from the nozzle. The flame surges through the bunker entrance in a roaring wave of burning fuel. Inside the confined chamber, the fire spreads instantly across the floor and walls. The defenders vanish behind a wall of flame. The burst lasts only 2 seconds. Then the trigger releases. The fire dies away. Smoke pours from the bunker opening. The squad waits for a moment. No gunfire follows. No movement. Captain Dunlap lowers his binoculars. That was the last one. Across Betio Island, the fighting is ending in similar scenes. Small groups of Marines move through the final trench systems. Each bunker they encounter is approached the same way. Rifle fire, grenades, and when necessary, fire. The weapon, once dismissed as crude, has become the most reliable method of clearing the island's defenses. Later that morning, American Marines stand along the ruined shoreline where the battle began. The lagoon still holds the wreckage of the first assault waves. Burned amphibious tractors, broken Higgins boats, discarded rifles. Coral stained dark by 2 days of fighting. Behind them, the island fortress built by the Imperial Japanese Navy lies shattered. Hundreds of bunkers remain standing. Concrete walls intact, machine guns still mounted in firing positions. But the bunkers are empty or silent. The structures themselves were never truly destroyed. Instead, they were turned against their defenders. Every sealed chamber, every narrow firing slit, every reinforced dugout became a place where fire could enter and air could disappear. Lieutenant General Holland M. Smith, commander of the American Amphibious Forces, later walks across the captured airfield while studying the destroyed defenses. The bunkers are impressive, carefully built, ingeniously positioned, strong enough to survive naval bombardment that would have flattened ordinary fortifications. But they share a fatal flaw. Once the Marines reached them, there was no escape route from inside, and the weapon used to clear them did not need to break the walls. It only needed to reach the air inside. Across the battlefield, the final smoke columns rise from burned bunkers and trench positions. The Japanese defensive plan had been based on absolute certainty. The certainty that artillery would decide the battle. The certainty that reinforced bunkers could not be neutralized without direct destruction. The certainty that flamethrowers were little more than primitive weapons. On Betio Island, those assumptions collapsed one bunker at a time.